of Ottawa. Raywat, take us through this process here. How long should this take?
Shouldn't take very long at all. What we've been doing, well, we meaning the federal government, not me, with regards to the COVID vaccines, is to move things along quickly by having data assessed in real time. So traditionally, manufacturers submit their data, meetings are held, slides are shown, documents are shuffled, and a decision is made. With the COVID vaccines, given the importance of the having them readily available, the experts, the regulators have been watching the data in real time. As a result, as soon as the final submissions are made, they should be able to move on this in a matter of days. So I anticipate we'll have a decision by the end of November.
End of November, meaning that another Christmas present for our kids. And I gather the shots are about a third of what's in the vials for adults, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And what does that provide? What could that potentially provide as we still continue to battle that fourth wave?
Well, interestingly, there isn't any vaccine efficacy computed officially for the children yet. That's because you compute that by looking at the number of COVID cases in the control group versus the number of COVID cases in the drug group in the clinical trial. But there weren't a lot of COVID cases in either group in the data that have been publicly shared so far. As a result, an actual vaccine efficacy score can't be computed. Instead, they look at the amount of antibodies produced in the blood samples taken from the children, and suggests that with this 1/3 dose, they're getting the same amount of protection as you would if you were an adult. So that's what we're getting. You're getting the same amount of antibody response as you would have if you were an adult.
I can hear certain parents definitely cheering. Others, again, we'll circle back to that hesitancy, perhaps, Raywat, even amongst parents who have received the vaccine themselves. So now that the official ask has gone into Health Canada, what should government officials be doing to reassure parents that it is, a safe thing to do for their children? Sometimes we'll take the risk as an adult, but we're a little more hesitant when it comes to our little ones.
Well, they have to really deploy the experts to talk about this transparently and honestly. Nothing is without risk. There's going to be a tiny, tiny risk associated with the vaccine for children, but they have to contextualize it. As compared to what? Is it the same risk as crossing the street when the light is green? Is it the same risk as taking the flu shot? Is it the same risk as, driving on the highway with your seatbelt on during rush hour? These are the kind of comparisons we need to make. Also, the pushback we're getting mostly is by parents saying, well, my kids are at low risk from COVID, and if they get COVID, they have a low risk of hospitalization and death, which is true, but that risk is not zero. Therefore, it must be made plain that the other benefit of vaccinating our children is that society gets to normal faster. This is not so much about the children, even though it is. It's also about everybody else.
And we know that kids, as a new parent, you're going to be learning that, kids tend to wind up in the germ factory that is schools and daycares, and they don't necessarily follow all the rules that we do. We've also seen another population today receive word that they can receive a third dose. That is individuals on First Nations. And we know that from officials today that the test positivity rate in some First Nations in Manitoba is upwards of 10%. And that could be as a result of living conditions. A lot of people are living very crowded in some homes, and just access to water on some First Nations has been difficult. Is this a good time, the right move to be offering the third dose to those individuals?
I think if we're going to offer third doses, we have to offer it to vulnerable people. And we can define vulnerability in a variety of ways. There's physical vulnerability, there's social vulnerability, there's vulnerability in terms of access to health care. And I think these communities definitely qualify as being vulnerable, therefore susceptible for bad outcomes if an outbreak were to occur in their population. So yes, I think those populations should definitely be targeted for third doses. I don't think it's right for everybody quite yet, but definitely for the elderly, for Indigenous communities, for homeless communities, for immunocompromised people, it is time. It will be for us eventually, I think. I think for most people, this is going to be a 3-dose regime eventually. But the priority has to be to get 1 and 2 doses into the rest of the world while protecting our most vulnerable.
Raywat Deonandan from the University of Ottawa is with us. Richard and Julie with you this Monday afternoon on 680 CJOB. Colin Powell, the former Joint Chiefs Chairman, Secretary of State, died, of course, complications from COVID, but he had also been treated over the past few years for multiple myeloma, a blood cancer. He was aged 84. Context is important here when we're talking about double vaccinated seniors who also have other conditions such as cancer, correct?
Absolutely right. And it wasn't melanomas, it was myelomas, so a kind of blood cancer, essentially. So he had both multiple myeloma and was over 84, as you noted. Both conditions are known to decrease vaccine protection. And this doesn't speak to the futility of vaccination, as some people will try to contextualize this news. It speaks to the need for everyone getting vaccinated to protect those who can't respond to it, and the need to layer on protection for those who are particularly vulnerable, like Colin Powell. And unfortunately, he lost his battle, but it wasn't wrong for him to get vaccinated. And who knows, maybe he was able to last longer as a result of vaccination than he would have otherwise. We don't know. But we should not take away from his death that the vaccine was not useful or effective. It certainly is.
Is that also, and I want to raise an issue because they say he died of complications of COVID-19. And often when people are talking about effects of the vaccine, saying, oh, I know somebody that died after they got the vaccine or got condition X after the vaccine, or you can't say they died of COVID because they died of complications of COVID. Is it difficult to show causation as opposed to correlation?
It's really difficult. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're driving along and you have a heart attack and you drive your car over a cliff as a result. What killed you? Was it the car crash or was it the heart attack? Depending upon the context, it could be either one, right? So when we look at data like this, a lot of investigation goes into teasing out causality, and sometimes it is not straightforward. There's no conspiracy going on here. There's just difficulties in parsing data appropriately. Early on in the pandemic, Russia was one of the only countries doing autopsies on all the COVID deceased to make sure that COVID was a strong player in the causal pathway. That's the best we can do, is we can say there is a strong statistical likelihood that this was a causal factor, or maybe have other factors involved like observation and a lengthy hospital stay, etc. But again, we should not take away from this that data is being inflated. If anything, COVID deaths have been underestimated, not overestimated, and the effects of vaccine injury, while real, are extraordinarily rare and overinflated by the frailties and fragilities of our vaccine surveillance system, which is not great.
More on that, I'm sure, in the days and weeks ahead. It's a fascinating conversation to have. We always enjoy having you on with us. Raywat Deonandan, thanks for doing this.
Thank you very much.